Okay, everyone. Okay. So why collective shadow work is really resonating with you?
That's for me still something really challenging to grab and to actually really work with it. So becoming aware of the shadows in a collective. Individually, it's for me easier to understand cause and effects. Collectively, much more challenging because it's such a diverse perspective you have to take to really understand what it is to all the stakeholders involved, the 7 generations that walked before us, the 7 generations that walked behind us, and from that perspective, taking a clear opinion of what a collective shadow is and what would be actually a healthy intervention to bring the shadow into the light. That's a quite demanding work.
Yeah, thanks. I think there's one element about what you shared that I would like to give my input is we think shadow is like mostly individual, but like you have your shadow, I have mine, and our relationship has a shadow. So when you're in a group of people, it's like exponential. And yeah, what you said about the way you bring shadow to the light, how we do it, this is crucial because it's going to condition what's going to come, if it's going to be repressed even more or if it's going to be transformed. Is there anyone who wants to share some insights from the check-in? Yes. How to diffuse this before it becomes like a really an issue? Great, thanks. Um, I think actually we can jump in right away because I wanted to start with talking about the blind spot of decentralized organizations. And I've mentioned a few in the description of the session. I think I said shadow hierarchies, toxic power games, conflict avoidance, and decision paralysis. I'm curious to hear from you guys, in your experience, what has been for you blind spot you have been witnessing in your team, in your organizations, in your movement. Maybe other ones? Communication, emotional realm, trauma. So trauma from the collective field and also from the context in which you're bringing your project. So, okay, it's been 10 years that I'm actually diving into this world. I started, yeah, launching some movement in Belgium around social business, social entrepreneurship. Then I went into the more political field, actually with something called We Brussels that Lean and Xavier know well. I don't know if you know that I was there at the very beginning, but I've also been involved in the Yellow Vest movement in France, and working with Fridays for Future and to help them integrate kind of regen culture from more XR background. And kind of like in all those movements that I've been part of, I've seen like patterns repeating themselves and a series of blind spots. So I've named already a few. Some others, as Jerem said, communication, implicit expectations are the number one. Yeah, a guy called Bernard Maréchiquet from IGI Partners in France, who's like a kind of whole accuracy master, says that implicit expectations is like really a killer. Um, broken feedback loop. Also, the fact that we're not really learning from our mistakes. Um, passive aggressiveness. So that's also a big one. So the tyranny of structurelessness. I think some of you know this article from Joe Freeman, which is quite foundational. Also the hierarchies of level of consciousness. So it's like I'm more teal than you, or I'm more decentralized, or I'm more Kigan 5 stage, or whatever other hierarchies. And what do I have? Lack of trust and care, and lack of boundaries. So basically, what I've been feeling in this kind of context is a reaction to a model, which could be called like centralized and characterized by, let's say, hierarchy, capitalism, patriarchy, and maybe masculinity also, a more yang energy. And the thing is that if decentralized organizations and the people in it do not do enough shadow work and trauma work to actually heal the wound that has been at the origin of the movement of reaction from centralization to decentralization, they cut themselves from a big part of the power of the power impact potential that they could use if they would use some of the tools of more hierarchical models. And I don't know if some of you know a guy called Peter Koenig from Sourcework, maybe. Yeah. Okay. So Frédéric Laloux from Reinventing Organization is more like, I guess, a more known reference. This guy actually, Frédéric met Peter Koenig, and after meeting and discovering Sourcework, he re-edited Reinventing Organizations. Why? Because he realized that all the people that he was interviewing in his book were not really random people. They were sources, which means they were like original founders that actually have take the first risk to create the field. And with a lot of decentralized collective I'm working with, the first step into kind of reintegrating healthy hierarchies and recognizing like the reality of it, moving from domination hierarchy to maybe more competence and experience hierarchy, is to work with source and to recognize the role of this person. Because the thing is quite paradoxical, but Peter Koenig says that till the source doesn't recognize him or herself, the collective intelligence of the field is blocked. And in my own experience, I've been there, because I was like rejecting the fact that I was the founder, or that I was like kind of the leader, and I wanted everyone to be at the same level, which was actually really damageable to the flow in this field that I created. So one element that is really key about source work is the notion that the source has two main missions. Number one is to actually define what are the next step for the organization, so create clarity in the direction. And number two is to protect the field by setting boundaries and defining what's in, what's out. Who is value aligned enough to be part of the field and who maybe is not. And basically to do this, the source needs to be connected for me with the sky, the yin, the intuition, where are we going, and the more yang energy to protect what really matters. And another blind spot that I've seen quite a lot is the paradox of inclusivity. So it's like lack of boundaries, so wanting to include everyone, including misaligned elements, misaligned people. And this, as a result, makes the most aligned, engaged members exclude themselves. So when you're super aligned with a project and you see someone who is misaligned who enters the field, you're going to step back. And that's some kind of paradox that we can see. So basically, and I'm not gonna be too long. What I've been trying to work on is a new concept. Is the concept of the androgynous organization. So it's basically a collective that has both the capacity to be top down and bottom up, centralized and decentralized, with like natural hierarchy and group coherence, with a clear direction and a high level of participation. And I think most importantly, that is value aligned and has impact and scale potential. Because what we often find is kind of a trade-off between those two. So how do we get there? How can we actually collectively do this shadow work that's going to help us to realign ourselves with our values and potentially benefit from the strength of centralized and decentralized models? What I've been doing with a few collectives, including Open Collective and We Share, is to develop a collective inner compass. So that's the tool that I was referring to, and that I want to share with you today. It's basically the idea that by analyzing or scanning the culture and looking at the value practice alignment of your team and your collective, you'll be able to identify key blind spots. And maybe I can show a bit here. It's gonna be a bit far, but what you end up is basically a visual map of between 0 and 100% the level of value alignment per value of your collective. And the idea here is to realize that no one is 100% aligned all the time, and that your capacity to embrace your misalignments are going to be crucial in actually realigning yourself. So developing this inner compass for a team is really, it's really important if you want to actually get in touch with your collective shadow. So I've been talking a lot. I'm wondering if there's any question about this. How do I do what? The value practice alignment. Okay. Yeah. So how do I get that? Okay. So the idea of this measurement is obviously subjective. It's not perfect, and it's like trying to get as close as possible of the reality to get a sense of most aligned value, least aligned value, and already from that information you can straight away voting. Yeah, but so there's actually multiple stage. There's a first voting where people actually just before the process, they actually from a subjective level say, okay, I think we're aligned from 0 to 100% with this value at that level to 50% or 60%. So you have a first number. And then you actually do the collective shadow work process, which means per value diving into best practice, shadow practice, and defining what are the top 3, top 5 shadow practice of your team, including your best practice, because if you dive in the shadow without celebration of the alignment, it's going to be a bit difficult. And from that point, afterwards, when there's a clearer view of actually your culture, you do a second round of noting and measuring. And often there's actually a gap between the first measurement and the second one. And here is the collective shadow work kind of effect that appears. Increasing the awareness of the level of alignment and the misalignment, so the shadow practices, which kind of everyone knows they're here, but they're not often explicited.
So once you have the restraining forces from the group's alignment or the collective unconsciousness in the visible layer, then you can work to reduce those restraining forces rather than amp up the things that are already working. The best practices, that stuff's already working, so just let it do what it does. But if you can reduce the restraining forces, then it's like taking the brakes off of the thing. So why invest in a bigger motor when you just remove friction from the context? And that'll compost that energy so that you can fly.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole key is really to relate to those shadow practices in a way which is not blame, shame, guilt, but is like curiosity and compassionate. And this is where like trauma-informed practices are really important to hold those spaces. Any other question?
Yeah, it's just a worry that comes up because doing shadow work requires a very safe, brave space. And my goodness, it brings up some dirt. And it makes us very, very uncomfortable. So you need like caretakers in an organization that can hold the group and that can create spaces for well-being and where people can come. And it requires a ton of trust. So yeah, it's just a worry, like, oh my God, like this is not easy. This is not easy.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and I think that the person that actually holds this circle needs to be pretty aware of its alignment and misalignment, and actually voice it in the group, to actually invite others to step into that field.
I don't believe that it has to be somebody in the group that brings again pressure on the system. It can be also a professional external who really, it's just his daily job, comes in, he takes all the projection, he takes all the shit, helps him to make the next step, he leaves, cleans himself, and they can be happy, playful. So it doesn't have to be always all on the system, because yeah, working with professionals is really helpful.
1-800 dial scapegoat. All the groups ills, right? Yeah. The ritual of banishment together.
The ritual of banishment. So there's one important element here, is that in the culture scan that I do, it's like really focuses on relationship rather than individual. We're looking at practices. We're not trying to scapegoat anyone. And yeah, that's really important so that everyone takes responsibility of what's happening in the field. So, is there another question before we move to the next part?
I would just like to understand what you just said. You are not focused on the individual, so you don't do individual work, and you are more focused on relational work. Is this what you just said?
So what I'm saying is that in the process of actually scanning the maturity of your culture, you ask questions to people to focus not on one, because often we're like in the good, bad versus bad guy narrative, and we're like in the team, what, there's this guy who really, and the way I do it, I use like anonymous questionnaires, and the idea is not to scapegoat someone. And it's so the invitation is really about looking at the relationship between two individuals to avoid like, yeah, this. And focus on the field at large.
Sorry, thank you. I would like, if possible, if there's time either now or later in the session, to talk more about if you've got that one person who doesn't seem to be a good faith actor. Because I think that like sometimes whatever your capabilities are, you try and go and do that in as best as you know. But if that person doesn't seem to be good faith responding, how do you deal with that situation?
Thank you. So I think that in this case, that's the role of the source, the person who protects the field, to define if the person is aligned enough, and the responsibility of the source to actually exclude the person if they're damaging the field too much. And here we're coming back to the paradox of inclusivity. If you want to keep that person because you're afraid of exclusion, the fire of your project is going to go down, 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 and you might, risk the survival of it. Exactly. I mean, I'm not saying exclude the first guy you don't like. Obviously, there has to be like, a process before.
You're telling about the role of the source. I'm thinking about what if the source is already a collective, a group of people, and this group of people need to solve internally the alignment, not alignment, because very often in grassroots movements, there is a group of people who are becoming the source or the part of the puzzle, and somehow the work need to be done internally there.
Yeah, I think it kind of always has to be somehow a collective decision, not to fall into like a autocracy. But there's one thing, the most, how to say, people has the most resistance with the concept of source, because the idea is that there cannot be two sources. It's like a stream of water. There's only one. Peter Koenig says that even in a relationship between two partners, there's one source. The person who took the risk to actually get like, who took the risk, who did the first move to kiss or whatever, who could have a no or a rejection, that person is the source. And it's, there's no two sources, there's only one. So, of course, it has to be a collective inquiry, and often the source is not clear enough and cannot need other people to clarify his own source, his or her own source. But in the end, the person that is connected to the vision, it's really about energetical field. There's only one. No, so the source can be transferred. So that's a big question that comes a lot. It's like, maybe it's possible to transfer the source from one person to one collective, but Peter Koenig, the guy who studied this for like 30, 40 years, never saw it. So for now, it's only to one person, and there's like source transfer and a whole thing. So if you want to dive deeper in this topic of source, I would highly recommend the book of Tom Nixon called Work with Source, who's really the person who, he just wrote a book that went out 6 months ago. It's really complete. He explores like XR, source story, but as well as like more tech companies. So yeah, that is a good reference.
Yeah, just to add maybe one thing to that source to give it a little bit nuance. Like I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Margaret Wheatley, where she describes the organism or an entity. Like there is indeed this first step of forming the identity, right? What are the values? Who are the people in? But then for the organism to survive, everything depends on how open it is towards the environment and how dynamic it can be in order to grow and to stay alive. So if the source closes up, or if the organism, as it started, if it's too narrow, it dies, right? So I just wanted to add that nuance to it whole has to go back to that one source. Actually, it doesn't. It depends on how open the source is towards the environment and how well it communicates with that, and the interconnectedness with other sources and other organisms, how well it will survive. So,
Margaret Wheatley. So yeah, thanks, Lynn. I think what you were just saying here is very important, because it's actually, for me, it connects to the yin-yang balance and this capacity of openness and closeness to actually protect the fire so that it grows enough and not opening the fire too fast. That would actually threaten the survival. But also knowing when to open it so that it grows, even with other fires and interaction with other campfires. I want to take I want to move to just another one-on-one. Maybe you want to shift space, if you haven't, to find someone that you haven't talked yet with, and try to give that person, actually, from that discussion, what resonated the most with you from what we've been discussing. So 5 minutes on this. Cool. So I see a lot of live conversations. I'm very curious to hear a bit some of the what did you vibe with during these 10 to 10 minutes?
So, yeah, as a source, how do you occupy that role along with your own ego development? And how do you enroll people around you to trust you to occupy that role? Yeah. I'm curious your answer to that. Yeah.
So, what did you say? Yeah, exactly. I did enough dancing last night. So I think that it's really key that the source is engaged in and dedicated into honest and compassionate shadow work, because every of his shadow is going to manifest in the field. And so it's really critical, and this is also what I've been working on this tool. Thanks. Is really to use the field to actually understand what are the main blind spots, and actually the first one to take ownership of these blind spots is the source, and to then kind of do this like exchange between the field and source is very important. There was a second part in your question, I think. Yeah. So it's a good question. The first important step, and actually most difficult, is to recognize yourself as a source. You actually don't need to like ask people, please see me as the source. That's not it. Because if you see yourself as a source, you're going to step in, and people are going to feel that you're actually connected. You're aligned with the energy field, and they know that when you say, okay, that's the direction, they will know because you're the source and you're aligned. It's really like kind of a more feeling element. And maybe like another thing is like, as a source, again, how you relate to your yin yang, feminine, masculine, is really key, because this is what is going to be able to make you able, like, as I said, to connect intuition to the next steps and to protect the field. And like, for instance, for me, I know that my challenge has been to embrace my masculine side and stop repressing anger. And the two key emotions, I think, as source, is like, everyone here, I think you can define what is the hardest for you. Is it to express anger in public, or is it to express vulnerability, more sadness, because anger is also vulnerable, but sadness or anger. And just from that, you can identify, are you more on the yin or the yang side? Is it easier to set boundaries, or is it easier to connect? Is there any insight from the discussions? I'm actually very curious because I was not in the groups.
Yeah, I came in late, so I didn't hear your explanation in the beginning. But then I found this guy sitting alone, and I said, okay, I sit there and have conversation. And then he tells me he comes from far away, and all of a sudden he tells me he comes from Israel. And I'm Palestinian, and all of a sudden I drop in my shadow of conflict and separation, and I want to keep talking to him, and yet I see unconsciously a lot of walls building between, and my heart wants to connect, and my mind wants to go in the story. So I was going in this shadow of conflict and wanting to be present with everything, and at the same time, like denying reality or going deeper. It was just very hard, and I understood that the conflict went from between us to between my heart and my mind. So that was a big shadow, I think.
I'm feeling uncomfortable that the mic is coming back to me every time. Is there anyone wants to, more insight from the discussion?
Yeah, we had a great conversation in French. That was not a joke. The shadow was that, oh, you have a French accent. Yeah. Okay. No, it was a great conversation. I was like we have a hard time with this concept of the source. So not sure we agree, or I don't know, and but like there's this idea that actually, we say that good leaders should be about creating more leaders, and I think a good source should be about creating more sources, right? So in a way, just because Lynn and I did the Regens Unite Brussels a couple of months ago, does that make us the source? We are the source maybe of Regens Unite Brussels, but Corey and Gil are the source of Regens Unite Berlin. And hopefully every one of you is going to be the source of another Regens community wherever you are. So, I don't know, it feels like there's a lot of patriarchy and ego in this concept of, oh, I am the source, and no, instead of, I want people to connect to me. No, I want people to connect to the source of what is needed in their community, in their context. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add it in, because first the source, when you said about the relationship, I start my thinking from that, and I thought, who was the source? And I start to really dig in that. And then I thought, wow, I already have, together with that thought, I'm start to withdrawing from that, and I'm afraid of thinking about the source. Why I am afraid of thinking about the source? Don't think about the source. You want to take it. You want to be the ocean. And it's so funny, and I understood that this is for me, this is for me the status thinking. So when you said source, I think status, who has a higher or lower status, and that's my first. That's my education. Somebody probably helped me to think that way.
It's a role.
Yeah,
it's a role,
and it's a role. And then I thought, wow, I never probably would hear that from the stream in the mountain, that you cannot be a stream and you cannot be a part of the whole water ecosystem, because at the end of you there is an ocean, and there are different streams coming from different other hills to join into the river and to join and la 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 la, and then and go to the clouds and be stream again and source. So this is also about the web of life, which is non-hierarchical, but there is a role to, not the status. So somehow similar to that, and then the source.
Non-hierarchical, but there's an order. There's an order, and maybe to answer Xavier, I think that the role of source, of global source, in French would say le sourcier. I really much like this, because he's just a channel, and his role is actually to create more sources in his field, like specific sources, ones that are going to take parts of the larger field. But my intuition is that we all part of a larger source field. So it's really important, this notion of like a global source that is going to create a space for other to take leadership and become specific sources. Yeah.
Hi, I really like the conversation that is going on. And I just wanted to add this thing because it kind of triggered me somehow. That the fact that in every organization or every collective, there is a power structure, of course. And so I was just thinking about like if it's possible not to have a power structure. Because more to me, like this concept of source is important, not to make the power structure as a taboo. So that.
Yeah. So what do you mean by power structure?
I mean, in terms of responsibility of power that we get in conversation and everything we are doing, there is a power structure somehow. Okay, so there is someone who's taking more responsibility than the other. There is someone which is also in the same thing of like there is someone which is influencing the other more than others. So
yeah. So I think that the example I like to take is like if your father tomorrow has a heart surgery and you need to choose a surgeon, you don't want random choosing. You want the best. So maybe the one who has most experience and has done most surgery. So recognizing like experience and competence, I think in natural hierarchies is important for the well functioning of the system. What you don't want is people that actually use the label to actually dominate or control. You know, it's like this sentence from Simon Sinek that said, "A boss has the title, a leader has the people." And yeah, I don't know if it answers your question, but maybe to go a level deeper, I've been working with holacracy and sociocracy, and for many years, and till I realized that these organizational structures are structures; they are not cultures. And in so many places I've seen like the whole, you know, co-op, holacracy, hola spirit, all the tools, external like structures that were being implemented on culture from the past. And this create like massive gap of like shadow hierarchies and this kind of stuff. And honestly, like, I mean, I'm doing my pendulum swing and I will go back, but right now I'm actually advocating explicit, clear hierarchy with healthy cultures, with regenerative cultures. These are functioning better than the opposite. Actually having the both is great, but I don't think we're there yet, honestly.
So it's basically important to recognize what is going on and talk about it.
Making the power dynamics explicit, yeah. This is the whole work.
And there's really good ways to activate the vibe that is supportive of this. So first and foremost, we want to avoid enacting our triggered responses, our shadows on each other, because then we activate the shadow responses of one another, and we all end up in one big escalating trauma response, and that totally sucks. It's just not very fun. We can do it, but I mean, it's just it blows. So rather not. And we can also upgrade even in addition to that by even avoiding the actual explanation of our trauma responses. Like there's a story that you have, but it's less interesting or important compared to the curiosity of exploration, of the visceral sensation, of the feeling of those walls coming up. That's the really interesting information. And when we can lean into curiosity and exploration of, oh, this is the feeling that actually is in the way of my expression right now, we can surface that information in a way that is depersonalized for everyone. And then it just makes it easier to bring that information into the space so that we can decide together how we want to influence the norms to help take care of you and reduce that restraining force on your participation, because as we do that together, we develop this substrate of trust. I can go literally all day. Thank you so much. This is incredible.
Hi, hello. Sorry. Thank you. I just have also some thoughts coming from the conversation I had. And I mean, for me, it's the first time I'm kind of in a space where we're talking about shadow work in the context of work somehow. And I come more from like or I have more experience more in like coming from a more spiritual perspective maybe. And there's one Indian yogi I particularly like. His name is Sri Aurobindo. I don't know if any of you know him or not. Sri Aurobindo, yeah. I mean, of course, he also touches upon the concept of shadows and about and of how do you work through the shadows, right? And I think there is this idea that I mean, he says, for example, that for every step you take into the light, you have to take then 3 steps in the dark and bring that light with you. But there is also the idea that you have to first go through a layer of personal, individual shadow before being able to tackle what can be called the collective shadow. And I think in this whole direction where we're all going, which is decentralization and communities and all of this, I think there has to be this separation in some way between individual shadows and collective shadows, and to understand that for us to be able to build I don't want to use this word now because I want to use it at the end, but anyway, for us to build healthy communities, we need healthy people. And I think this whole conversation about blind spots is actually about having healthy people to build healthy communities.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think just quickly on that, like, I think collective shadow is a notion of transgenerational, and actually it's not what I'm talking here. What I'm talking here is create containers to facilitate individual shadow work, so that then people can actually tap into the transgenerational and like more larger collective shadow. So it's kind of like a raccourci or, yeah. I tricked you totally, guys.
Yeah, just to reflect, I just hope that we don't only invite healthy people in our organizations, because they would be completely empty. So
Yeah.
this is not gonna
I really like this.
We need everyone.
Okay.
I think the culture in an organization can be healthy to welcome everybody to do the work that needs to be done together. Right? It doesn't have to be that heavy. It can just be. And conflict makes us grow. So
Exactly.
you can also welcome it and be light about it. Like, shit, crap, I'm so angry. Throw it out.
Yes, let's make it playful.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And lunch is up, ladies and gentlemen. Hallelujah.